nothing but true?
I do.
Okay, have a seat for me, please, ma'am. And can I get you to tell us your name and spell it for our court reporter?
My name is Jessie Worley. It's Jesseworley.
And Ms. Worley, how are you currently employed?
I am a latent fingerprint examiner at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in the Division of Forensic Sciences, which is the state crime lab.
What sort of background or training do you have to be a latent print examiner?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Forensic and Investigative Sciences from West Virginia University. After my graduation, I was hired by the GBI, and I completed approximately a 2-year training program designed by the GBI to complete latent print casework. And then at the completion of my training, I am still required to do at least 16 hours of additional training every year.
Have you, over your time, tell me again, how long have you been with the GBI?
I was hired in 2007.
Since 2007, have you actually had an occasion to test items of evidence against and compare them to known samples?
Yes, I have.
Any idea how many times you've done that?
A lot. I work on average 30 cases a month, so 30 cases a month for about 10 years.
Have you ever testified in the field of latent print examination?
Yes, I have.
And just to be clear, latent print examination and latent print comparisons, are those the same thing, or is comparing part of the examination?
The way the GBI delegates or delineates our casework, examination is the portion of our work that would include comparisons, but we also do what we refer to as processing services as well as database services as well.
Okay, so when I use the term latent print examination, for you, does that sort of include everything that you do?
Yes.
And again, have you had an occasion to testify on all of those things previously?
Yes, I have.
And have you been tendered as an expert in the field of latent print examination previously?
Yes.
Any idea how many times?
About 58. I think today is 59, if that goes that way.
Have those all been in the state of Georgia?
Yes.
Have those been in superior courts of Georgia?
Yes, and once in federal court.
Judge, at this time, we would tender her as an expert in the field of latent print examination.
Judge, I actually tried a federal case when she was sworn as an expert. I was familiar with her CV and stipulated she was an expert.
Right, she's admitted as an expert.
Small world.
It's funny.
In this particular case, were you assigned
Not.
Do you have an understanding, however, of how this glove was used to try and obtain both DNA and latent prints?
It's my understanding that the glove was submitted to the GBI crime lab and was worked by a different examiner at the time, but they would have followed similar protocols to those that were in place after I was hired.
Okay. Now, when we say latent prints, what is a latent print?
Latent prints are those that are typically left behind when a person touches or handles an object with their hands. What we look for in latent prints are what are also referred to as friction ridge impressions, and friction ridges are made, those impressions are made when the friction ridge skin of your hands, which you can also find on the soles of your feet, comes in contact with the surface and transfers some residue like sweat or dirt or blood or any other kind of contaminant from the surface of your skin onto the object or surface that you touched. You can kind of relate it to the idea of a rubber stamp. If you have a stamp, you put ink on it and you place it on a sheet of paper, you make a copy of the stamp. The friction ridge skin on your hands is composed of a series of ridges that make different patterns and contain different features that can be used for comparison. The handling of the object creates that transfer of residue from the skin to the surface. And then it's that latent print that may not be visible that in the lab we can use different development techniques, different chemicals or powders to make it visible and then compare it to known sources.
Why is it that we use print examination in the world of criminal forensic science?
So fingerprint comparisons and identifications are based on two premises. One is that your fingerprints or a person's fingerprints are unique to that individual. That arrangement of features and patterns that are found in your fingerprints aren't going to be found replicated in another person. So if a fingerprint can be identified, it's going to be identified to one source and not multiple sources.
What if you have an identical twin?
Research that's been published shows that even identical twins who may share DNA have different fingerprints.
Okay. What is the second premise?
The second premise is that arrangement of those features and details that are in your fingerprint patterns is permanent over your lifetime. Fingerprints are formed in utero, so they're already formed before a baby is even born. And then that arrangement stays essentially the same. It grows bigger as a child grows to adulthood, but that arrangement of those features stays the same. Now, there are times when injury or certain diseases can impact the arrangement of those features or their appearance, but even still at that point, sometimes the injury makes it even more unique. Certain scars can become a permanent feature and then can also be used in comparison. But because they don't change, they're expected to be the same, even if you're using comparison or known exemplars from a number of years ago, or in an instance like this, when they're being used a number of years after the latent prints were deposited on the evidence.
Okay. And so you referenced in this case, let me go back. Can you see what's depicted on the screen in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Does any part of that glove still exist in order to be able to obtain latent prints?
No, not really. At the time when I saw this glove, I did have it in my custody at the lab for a period of time, but the latex or the rubber material that particular glove is made out of has degraded over the years, and it's in a lot of small pieces. Kind of the idea of you put a piece of paper through a cross-cut shutter, it's small. There's not a lot of usable surface area left.
So then how are you able to do a print comparison 12 plus years later, or nearly 12 years later?
The Gbi protocols that were followed at the time the examination was begun in 2005, the latent print examiner that worked the case did a series of chemical enhancements applied a series of chemical enhancements to the surface of this item. All of our results of fingerprint development or latent print development are photographed. So the photographs that were taken in 2005 were still available for me to use, I guess, in 2018.
And with these photographs, are they sufficient that you can actually get the kind of detail that you were discussing earlier with the fingerprint?
It was sufficient. Of course, in the last 12 years, imaging technology and digital photography has improved significantly. So it may not have been in as ideal a condition as would have been available today using the cameras with the number of megapixels that are available. So it may be less than ideal for what today's standards would be, but they were still usable to do comparisons with, yes.
Now, we've been talking about prints, and most people have heard of fingerprints and kind of think of that. Is that the only kind of print that you use for comparison in cases?
So like I said, you have friction-ridged skin that covers the entire palm or surface of your hand. So from the tips of your fingers all the way down to where your wrist bends, we refer to it as bracelet creases, but you have friction-ridged skin that entire surface. Same thing on the soles of your feet. From the tips of your toes all the way back around your heel is the same ridged skin. So typically as a latent print examiner, when we refer to fingerprints or latent prints, we all automatically think of fingers because that's the area that's most commonly recorded and stored for comparison and identification purposes. But in actuality, you can compare any area of friction-ridged skin, so even the lower joints of your fingers or any areas of the palms can also be compared and identified.
In this particular case, did you review the work that was done by the initial latent print examiner back in '05?
I reviewed portions of the initial step of our evaluation or examination process, which is referred to as an analysis.
Okay.
I reviewed the results of the analysis. I did not duplicate any of the comparisons that would have already been reported. I did additional comparisons to the new exemplars that were submitted in 2018.
Okay, and when you say exemplars, what do you mean by that?
Exemplars are our known source recordings, so fingerprints or palm print records that are attributed and already known to have come from a particular individual.
So am I understanding you to say that you duplicated the portion to determine if there was a usable print, but not any of the comparisons that may have been done to persons of interest throughout the years?
Right, that's correct. So what I did essentially was go back and look at, well, the initial examiner indicated that there were latent prints that were of value for comparison. So I tried to locate as best as possible from old notes which prints or impressions he would have been referring to in his notes. At that point, I did my own analysis to determine if by today's standards at the lab or today's procedures and policies, that they would in fact still be something we would compare. And as far as the glove is concerned, I did conclude that they were suitable for comparison and then proceeded with the comparisons to the new exemplars.
Is there any difference between the comparisons that you did recently and I'm using the word comparison, sorry, let me go back. The examination you did recently to the examination that was done by the original fingerprint, the original latent print examiner back in '05?
So overall, the process of what we look for during the analysis as far as what makes an impression of value or suitable to be used for comparison is an assessment of the amount of detail that's present in the impression. We're looking really to see is the clarity present and the quality of the impression clear enough to be able to see the features to use in a comparison, and then is there a sufficient quantity to be able to make an identification. While that process in and of itself hasn't changed, some of our quality thresholds may have been a little different in 2005 than they are in 2018. So that was the first part of my examination, was to assess whether or not they were going to be something I could compare according to our policy.
And were your findings consistent with 2005 findings?
Yes, both the 2005 findings and those that I had were that there were impressions or latent prints that could be compared.
How many?
In my assessment, I located or identified 3 different areas of what appeared to be friction ridge impressions or latent prints that I determined to be suitable for comparison.
Okay.
I'm unsure how that may have related to the original notes.
Now, looking at, you mentioned earlier some known exemplars. When was the first time that you actually did your initial examination of this glove?
It was in November of 2018.
And since that time, were you provided certain exemplars to compare to the 3 prints you found on this glove?
In November of 2018, I was provided with the glove and the photographs that were taken in 2005, and I was asked to compare them to 2 different individuals that were named on one of our GBI evidence submission forms. The submission forms came with ID numbers that I used to retrieve the known exemplars from the state database.
Okay. And who were those 2 persons that you were asked to compare?
Sorry, just 1 minute. The names as they appeared on the exemplars were Bo Dukes and Ryan Alexander Duke.
Based on the 2 exemplars that you were given, did either of those 2 persons match to the 3 latent prints you found were suitable for comparison?
In the course of my examination, I was able to utilize a comparison software program to aid my examination and comparison due to the difficulty and the complexity of the impressions from the glove. I put both sets of the exemplars into the software as well as the 3 areas of friction ridge impressions from the glove, and I used the computer to do an automated comparison process. The comparison process, or the computer software, brings back areas of potential similarity between the latent prints and the known exemplars, which helps to narrow down and limit the amount of searching or manual searching to do in the palm areas. When talking about latent print comparisons, the finger areas are fairly limited in terms of the size and volume and amount of ridge detail present. But when you start comparing the area of a single finger to the area available in a palm print, you go from having, a 1/2 square inch area to several square inches of space to search, and it can become a lot of work and a lot of area to search, and it can be difficult sometimes depending on how limited the detail in the latent print may be, which was what drove me to make the decision to use the computer software to help automate that process. Once I had the latent prints and the exemplars in the computer program and the search program had run its course, I did comparisons of what it brought back as areas of potential match and evaluated each of those areas against the latent prints. As a result of those searches that I did on the computer program, I was able to identify 2 of the impressions from the glove to one of the individuals whose exemplars I had put into the computer.
Which individual's prints matched?
The identifications were made to the palm prints that had the name Ryan Alexander Duke.
Were any of the prints that were found on this glove, have they been matched to or seem to be from the person known as Bo Dukes?
No.
Now, you've mentioned 2 of the 3. Let's talk about that third one. At this point, are you able to scientifically tell us if that print matches any known exemplar you've been given?
Not at the time in November when I did the initial examination, no.
Okay. Can you tell us that now?
No, the answer is still no. I did additional comparisons to that remaining print again in February of this year. The results of my additional comparisons, however, are still inconclusive.
Okay, so let me be clear. Are they inconclusive as to everybody, or are they inconclusive as to one person?
Because I only compared one person, they're inconclusive to that one. No.
Okay. Was that compared to Ryan Duke?
Yes.
But again, are you able to exclude that as being from Ryan Duke?
No.
Are you able to include that or say that that's Ryan Duke's?
No.
But the 2 that had sufficient detail for comparison, are you able to tell this jury, based on your expertise, who those prints belong to that came from the glove?
Yes.
And who was that?
They were made by the same source as the prints that are on the cards that had the name Ryan Alexander Duke.
No further questions.
Just for clarification, but the 2 prints that you were able to analyze that were sufficient compared to Mr. Duke's fingerprints, you were able to rule out that there was not a match.
So all 3 I determined to be suitable for comparison. There is enough in all 3 to be able to compare them. The 2 I was able to identify to the cards that had the name Ryan Alexander Duke. So in theory, that rules out being from another source. The third one, my results were inconclusive.
Yeah, that is, you just can't say one way or the other. There's not sufficient information with regard to that print.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anything further? All right, you step down.
Thank you.
Then Reed, she can't be excused. Mr. Rigby, can she be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Fox?